Hello and welcome to our review of Veronica Mars. I'm Paul,
And I'm Dave.
and this week we're discussing the episode The Quick and the Wed. This episode originally aired March 22nd, 2006. Let us start with the number one film at the box office, Dave. Any idea what it could be?
Around March.
Last week we had V for Vendetta. I will tell you, it is a different movie this week.
Yeah, it's understandable. No.
I would be a
Nothing.
little surprised if you've seen this because it's like a crime kind of movie, and I don't think that's really your jam.
Okay. Yeah, nothing is immediately springing to mind.
It's a movie called Inside Man.
Okay. Like maybe the smallest hint, maybe seeing the trailer for it, but yeah, nothing I've actually seen of the movie.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen this one. It's I didn't know it was a Spike Lee movie. That's interesting. But
Huh.
moving on, let us go to the number one song in America this week, Dave. Any ideas what it could be?
Getting around this time.
March, it's spring, probably pretty nice weather outside. You can, at least here in Canada, you can go outside and not be frozen.
Yeah, yeah. Depending on where you are, supposedly, but
Well,
yeah.
yeah, fair enough. If you're in like alert or something, then yeah, you're fucked.
Yeah.
Any ideas?
Song wise, nothing else is jumping out at me of what would have been bopping at the time that would have been on the number one list in comparison to what we probably would be listening to.
Yeah, I definitely wasn't listening to this at the time. It is a song called "So Sick" by Neo.
Okay. Again, not even ringing any sort of bells.
So this is one of those things where I think we talked about it last week, but like I've looked at his like albums, and I'm like, I know the cover of like the first three or so, and then after that, I'm like, I don't remember any of this.
Hmm.
So he had a really good 3 years, and then I think he kind of fell off. But
Hmm.
he's like an R&B kind of singer.
No, understandable.
Alrighty, so let us move on to video games because my god, is there a bunch this week. Alrighty. March 15th, if you had a PC, you could pick up Battlefield 2 Euroforce.
Eh?
It's an expansion for Battlefield 2. That might have been last week, actually, I don't remember for sure.
Hmm.
March 16th, if you had a PS2 and you lived in Japan, you could go to the store and pick up this little game called Final Fantasy 12.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is 12 one of the good ones?
12. 12 is 12, which
Okay.
has its good bits and its other couple of bits. It's one that I can't exactly say that I've played or experienced very much of, but I have a multitude of information about it.
Okay. Moving on to March 17th. Oh my god, Dave. Oh my god. March 17th, if you had a PS2, you could go to the store and pick up 24 the game.
Yeah, that was the thing at the time. So I question how the graphics would have looked with it.
I
Again,
so
they probably tried, but still kind of case of things on the PS2.
yeah, I mean, so you have to set your sights that it's a PS2 game, but I remember this graphically being pretty good. The problem and like they got like the actors to actually like voice their characters and everything. From memory though, the gameplay is trash.
Yeah, something kind of has to suffer for all the particular things, and especially with getting all the voice actors for it and whatnot, that's probably going to cost a pretty decent sum of the budget.
Yes. Yeah, it's from what I remember, it's a pretty uninspired third person shooter.
Mm.
Also on March 17th, if you were over in Europe and had a PC, you could pick up Call of Cthulhu Dark Corners of the Earth,
Yes.
which
Again, the vague memory of seeing this particular title, but never seeing any sort of gameplay or getting into it myself.
I think it did come to North America. It was just like an Xbox exclusive or something.
Hmm.
Oh no, it got a release on PC later in North America,
Hmm.
but okay. Moving on, still on March 17th, if you were in Europe and you had a PC, you could pick up a game called Keepsake,
Hmm.
which is a third-person point-and-click adventure game
Yes, when those things existed at the time.
developed by a Canadian company called Wicked Studios, who I'm not familiar with.
Hmm.
Moving along, March 20th, oh my god. If you had a Nintendo DS, you could pick up this little game called Metroid Prime Hunters.
Yes, when they were questioning what to do with the Metroid series, and they decided to follow along with what Halo and the other shooters were doing, make it a multiplayer shooter, which was neat, but nevertheless also kind of questionable.
Yeah. Also, on March 20th, if you had a Nintendo DS and you weren't in the market for a Metroid game, which I don't know why you wouldn't be, you could pick up Tetris DS.
Because it's Tetris. It needs to be on everything.
Yeah. There was one Tetris game that was on like the PS4 that looked actually really cool. Can't remember what
No,
it was
it's
called now.
understandable.
Because it looked like
Yeah,
super
it's
trippy, and I think it was like you could use it with like the PSVR.
yes, with something like that. Again, there's the couple of interesting ideas that people have had with Tetris to make it fancy or intrigue some of the gameplay style to it.
And also on March 20th, if you had a PC or Xbox 360, you could pick up this little game called Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion.
Yes, which was a thing. Not specifically my thing when it was kind of happening around the time, but it was a thing.
Yes, I feel like this was probably the first one to become like a mainstream hit.
Yeah, kind of paving the way for the other thing that we got caught up when it was a mainstream hit.
Yeah, because this is followed obviously by Skyrim, and before this is Morrowind, which I don't remember anybody really that I knew talking about, but I remember like Oblivion being a thing.
Hmm.
Alrighty, moving on, still on video games, March 21st, if you had a PSP, you could go to the store and pick up a little game called Metal Gear Acid 2.
Yes.
I did not know that that game got a sequel.
I am also not sure how this game supposedly existed, but it supposedly doesn't surprise me. But still, this is the first I've heard of it.
Okay, I remember seeing them like advertising for Acid and thinking it sounded cool, but I didn't have a PSP
Hmm.
because it was like a turn-based version of Metal Gear. Anyway, moving along, still on March 21st, if you had a PSP, you could pick up Me and My Katamari.
Yes, because that is always a nice time.
Yes, one of the many Katamari games that have come to North America and failed.
Yeah.
They keep trying, I'll give them credit for that, but I feel like they've never had a hit in North America.
Yeah, I suppose within the case of what a hit would supposedly stand for.
Yeah, I mean, like, I would argue none of the Katamari games have become mainstream in North America.
Yeah, just kind of keeping their cult status.
Yeah, very much so. March 21st, if you had a PS2, you could pick up a game, oh boy, I'm going to mispronounce this. Sukadin V or 5, I'm not sure which it's meant to be.
With the Roman numerals, it would be 5.
Okay, I wasn't sure if that was meant to be a Roman numeral or if it was meant to be something else.
No, with this one. Because again, Suikoden is very much a decent RPG with the stylings and whatnot it has, but not too familiar with 5 and its particular mechanics.
Alrighty. Moving on. Still, on March 21st, if you had a Nintendo DS, you could pick up Tao's Adventure Curse of the Demon Seal.
Yeah.
I have no recollection of this, and the box is not helping.
Yeah. Case of seeing a whole bunch sitting on store shelves and whatnot, but just the marvelous case of never touched this game.
Also, on March 21st, if you had a PC, PS2, or Xbox, you could pick up The Godfather the Game.
Yes, because that was the thing with a multitude of years of how long The Godfather's been out.
Yes, I feel like this was the era where a bunch of those like classic 70s and 80s crime films got like video game adaptations.
Mostly because of the case of the people sort of looking at it, it's like, oh, we could supposedly make money off of this. And they tried so.
Yeah, because they did Godfather, they did Reservoir Dogs, although that's the 90s, and they also did Scarface around the same time.
Hmm.
And there are probably some others, but I remember this game actually being surprisingly good. Like, I didn't have high expectations when I heard about it, but I remember it actually being, like, it's a GTA clone in a lot of ways, but it was, like, a pretty good GTA clone.
It's understandable. Meshing fairly well with either the idea of the story, the gameplay styling that it best sort of fits with, and the popularity of it at the time.
Yeah, yeah. It's not like, I'm not going to say this is, like, an amazing game that everybody has to play, but if you've played through a bunch of GTA games and you want something similar but a little different, maybe pick it up. Also, on March 21st, if you had a PSP, you could pick up Tom Clancy's Splinter Cell Essentials. Which...
Supposed yay? Like, only having a vague recollection of the Splinter Cell series and no recollection of this particular one.
Yeah, this apparently did not do well, and I guess it was an original game. I assumed it would have just been a port of the first Splinter Cell, but it doesn't appear to be. Okay. Moving along, finally, March 22nd, if you had a PSP, you could pick up a little game called Beautiful Joe Red Hot Rumble.
Yeah, they tried. This is kind of one of the last ones that they managed to kind of get out with it.
Yes, I keep hoping that we'll get a Beautiful Joe, like, re-release or something.
It would be interesting, but it's just kind of the case of it's been sitting on the back shelf of the people who own the rights and whatnot for it. No one's sort of given any sort of idea for the companies being like, hey, you have this game series, bring it back.
Yeah, I don't know why Capcom hasn't, like, done... Because they've been doing so many, like, with the Resident Evil games and stuff, so many of, like, modern versions. I'm like, you don't even have to remake Beautiful Joe, just, like, re-release it on PS4 and 5 and, like, maybe clean the graphics up a touch. Like...
Yeah, spruce it up, make it look fancy pretty, and people will be like, oh, the thing.
Exactly. And finally, on March 22nd, if you had a Nintendo DS or a PSP, you could pick up Worms Open Warfare.
Because it's Worms.
Are you a fan of the Worms games, Dave?
Kind of the case of I know it's the gameplay style, but aside from only playing it once or twice before, it's nothing that I have within my collection.
Okay, I'm a big fan of the Worms games. They are a very, very good time. But we shall continue on. Let's go back to the episode here. Alrighty. Okay, so Keith questions Veronica about the explosives found in Terrence's garage. Later that day, Keith talks to Sheriff Lamb about this information, but he is dismissive of Keith. At Logan's suite, Dick insists on watching a TV expose on Aaron Eccles and the Eccles family, because Dick is a dick.
Yeah.
The show is also playing at Hannah's house and at Java the Hut, which I still love that name. Veronica serves a bachelorette party and notices the bride Heidi had with a large ring on her finger. Lamb searches Terrence's hangar, but refuses to tell Keith about his findings. Jane, the bride-to-be sister, who is also Wallace's girlfriend, comes up to Veronica at school and says that Heidi is missing. Sheriff Lamb holds a press conference announcing that he is about to arrest Terrence Cook for the bus crash. Veronica confronts Logan about his relationship with Hannah. Veronica questions some of the other bachelorettes who describe Heidi as impulsive and explain Heidi got creeped out by a man she thought was following the group. Beaver talks to Kendall about their company, the Phoenix Land Trust. Cliff McCormick talks to Logan about his upcoming trial, encouraging him to take a deal. While scoping out some leads on Heidi, Veronica and Wallace find her car abandoned. Keith talks to Terrence's car mechanic, who says that he is familiar with the cabinet where the explosives were found and denies seeing anything suspicious in the cabinet about a month ago. Veronica talks to Jane about her findings, and Jane points out a particular man. Kendall visits Aaron in prison and goads him to invest in the Phoenix Land Trust, and Aaron agrees if she will visit Logan. A couple of bikers spit on Logan outside a convenience store. Logan goes on a date with Hannah, and her mother, Stephanie Denenberg, cautions her against dating him. Logan uses Miss Denenberg's email account to send a message to Dr. Griffith. Veronica tracks down the suspect in Heidi's disappearance and finds it is Vinnie Van Lowe. Veronica talks to Vinnie, but he reveals nothing. Logan and Hannah agree to have sex. Keith presents his evidence for Terrence's innocence, but Sheriff Lamb reveals that Terrence is in surgery. Miss Dumas's father shot him after he broke into her house. Mr. Pope, the FBLA teacher, talks about the possible downsides of Woody's plan for incorporation. Beaver has increased his lead in the stock market contest. Veronica tries to call Heidi, but the call goes directly to her fax. Veronica prints out the faxes that were in the machine's memory, and one of them is a flyer from the band of Heidi's old boyfriend, Nick. Veronica successfully tracks down Heidi. Heidi says the wedding is off due to a friend texting Heidi saying Paul is cheating on her. However, Veronica deduces that Nick did not send the fax, nor did Heidi's friend send the text, implying that someone is trying to prevent Heidi from going to the wedding. The whole family waits at the wedding for Heidi, who eventually shows up. Heidi and her fiancé fight and eventually break up at the altar. Kendall makes a pitch to Logan about the Phoenix Land Trust. She sneaks into Duncan's bathroom and takes hair from the drain. Tom Griffith storms in angrily. He threatens Logan and proposes a deal. He will drop the testimony against Logan if Logan will break up with Hannah. At Java the Hutt, Logan suddenly walks up to Veronica and says, "I think I've done something horrible." So, what do you think of this episode, Dave?
Well, it was interesting enough. I think with the couple of particular points that kind of happened within the episode, there wasn't anything super major. There was the one or two points kind of adding to the case, but on whole, it mostly kind of stuck to the wedding issue of the story, and that was just kind of filler, something to kind of fill in the space. The couple interesting interactions with the characters was interesting enough, but yeah, on whole, it wasn't anything that I found incredibly enthralling about this particular one.
Yeah, this episode, there's not a ton that happens for the overall story. And like you said, it's kind of more or less a filler episode. It's a pretty good one, but yeah, it's not essential, really. So a few important things do happen, though, and we should quickly go over them. We find out that the explosives that Veronica found in the hangar were marked C4, which we didn't know what kind of explosives they were. Yes. Sheriff Lamb issues a warrant for Terrence's arrest, charging him with 8 counts of murder. Terrence had a mechanic detail each of his cars once a month. The mechanic would have found explosives on his next visit. Once Keith learns this fact, he concludes that the C4 was planted to frame Terrence. Kendall visits Aaron Eccles in prison. She asks him to invest in the Phoenix Land Trust, and he agrees to give her money if she gets some of Duncan's hair out of the shower at the Neptune Grand Hotel. Terrence gets shot by Miss Dumas's father while trying to break into her house. And finally, Hannah's father, Dr. Griffith, tells Logan that he'll drop his testimony against Logan if he promises to stay away from Hannah. The murder case against Logan is obviously in shambles if this should happen.
Yeah. No.
Alrighty. So, if there's nothing else about this episode next week, oh boy. Um, this ain't gonna be a fun one, Dave.
Is this the big episode?
Um, so the next episode is going to set some things up for season 3, and it's also going to be just a very difficult episode.
Radios.
Okay. So the episode next week is called The Rapes of Graph.
Ew.
Yes. Yeah. Uh, in this episode, while visiting Hearst College, Veronica runs into her old boyfriend, Troy. He is subsequently charged with date rape of a student. Meanwhile, Logan deals with the aftermath of breaking up with Hannah. Yes. There's going to be some guest stars here that maybe you'll know.
Interesting.
2 of the stars from the recently canceled Arrested Development will make an appearance.
Oh.
Yes. So, until next time, I'm Paul.
And I'm Dave.